Hello, my name is Jennifer Ukoma, and today I'm going to be presenting on For Colored Girls, the Tyler Perry adaptation. The full title of the original work is For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, and it's a choreo poem written by Ntozake Shange. Ntozake Shange was originally named Paulette Linda Williams. She was born on the 18th of October 1948 to American upper middle class parents, and for this reason she was able to be afforded a good education. So this also meant though that she had to go to white schools or white dominated schools, and therefore she suffered racism, alienation, racial discrimination, etc. etc. In 1966, when she was in the first year of college, Ntozake got married, and the marriage failed and she became depressed. After that, due to the depression, she decided to take her own life, to commit suicide, which was a failed attempt, thankfully. Then she got married again sometime after, and that marriage also did not last very long before it failed. In 1971, Ntozake came to terms with her feelings of alienation and depression, and she decided to change her name. In Zulu, which is an African language, Ntozake means she who comes with her own things, and Shange means walks like a lion. These names just represent strength and independence, which is something that she was trying to embody, and which is also something that women of color all over the US try to embody and try to try to get in general. So another reason why Ntozake changed her name is because she felt her original birth name was too white, and she felt it celebrated a culture that championed slavery, and she wanted to completely disassociate with that. I mean, she was trying to come to terms with her African roots. She was trying to come to terms with herself as being a woman of color, and so she disassociated herself in her own way from a culture that she considered championed slavery. On the 27th of October 2018, Ntozake died at the age of 70. For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough is a choreo poem that has been written over the period of years. It is not a play. It is, although it has been adapted for stage plays, but the choreo poem in its original form is a choreo poem. Now, choreo poem is a word that was coined by Ntozake herself, and it's simply a dramatic form that includes poetry, dance, music, and song. So there is the story of Ntozake. When she had been a poet for some time, she had been writing her poems, and one day during a workshop she was attending, she was asked to get up to read her poems. And when she got up to read them, she started moving, and from the beginning to the end of her presentation, of her reading of the poem, she continued to move in rhythm and dance to the lines that she was reading. And she is known to say that at the end of that whole performance, she said she was never going to be able to stand still to read any of her poems again, and that was when the choreo poem style was born. As I already said, For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough is a collection of 20 different poems written over a long period of time. But in 1977, all the works were stitched together to make one body of work, and it was printed into a book. For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough was written to confront issues that are pertinent with women of color, including race, beauty, self-doubt, relationships, and sex, and was also written to explore female friendships and the solace and stability that they offer in challenging times. The original work, has 7 characters that are only identified with the colors of the outfits they wear. And we have the ladies in brown, yellow, purple, red, green, blue, and orange. And whilst all of the other 6 colors are the colors of the rainbow, the brown represents the colored woman, the brown skinned girl. The narrative style of the work is poetic and it's written in rhythm and lines like a poem, and it is recited. They are just monologues that are recited as a poem. The language used is vernacular. If you look at the title at the top of the screen, you would see where the rainbow is enough. The spelling of enough just connotes the way the kind of vernacular a colored woman who has grown up in a colored community will speak, pronounce it. And it was written this way with the intent to evoke the way a real colored woman will speak and write. And it was also written this way so it feels authentic and make it relatable, make it open to the people who are the subject matter of it. Tyler Perry being the one who adapted this original work to a movie, let's talk about him a little. So he was born on the 13th of September 1969, and his birth name is was Emmett Perry Jr., named after his father, who was Emmett Perry Sr. So Tyler Perry is an American actor, director, producer, and screenwriter, and he grew up in an abusive home. His father was known to beat on them at the slightest thing, and would also say that if they did any wrong, he was going to beat it out of them. Apart from the physical abuse that Tyler Perry suffered at home, he also suffered sexual abuse outside the home at the hands of various other people, both male and female. At the age of 16, he changed his name to Tyler in an effort to distance himself from his father, and he also attempted suicide as a child, trying to escape his father's beatings. Tyler Perry had a close relationship with his mother, and she would take him to church. And in church, he found solace. He found a kind of relief in religion and in God. And also, Tyler Perry grew up watching his mother and his sisters suffer abuse in relationships, and saw firsthand the problems, the issues, the many struggles that the woman of color had to go through. And so he bases a lot of his work, a lot of his movies on discussing these issues that women of color suffer and go through and struggle with. The movie For Colored Girls was adapted in 2010, of course, from the original work, which is For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. It follows the story of 7 major and 3 minor characters, how their lives interconnect with each other and their struggles as women of color. And although it draws heavily from the original work, there are also some differences. The movie was rated R due to some scenes of violence and rape. Now let's talk about those similarities and differences between Ntozake's and Tyler Perry's works. Similarities. Both the works have 7 major characters, and all of the major characters can be identified by their color. In the book, it is the color of the outfits they are putting on. In the movie, it is by their characterization. You can tell who is who. And a lot of times it is the lines that they were given from the book. The struggles discussed in both works are similar. Of course, they center around women of color and the struggles that they've had to go through. Both works have the poems as monologues, and although not all of the monologues make it into the movie, the more important ones do. The difference is, first of all, the first very obvious difference is the title. For colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough, in the movie has been shortened to just for colored girls. Aside the seven major characters that are both in the book and the movie, in the movie we also have three minor characters that are represented by black and white, and some people also say the third character, which is a very minor character and only comes up in one scene, they say she is represented as pink, but that is not a popular opinion. In the movie, the characters have names. They don't just have their colors, they also have names that they can be identified with. And whilst the language in the choreo poem is vernacular, the language in the movie is more refined and civilized. The cast of the movie are color themed like the book, but we find some of the casts of the movie saying lines that belong to other casts from the book. So in the book, we might have lines said by the lady in brown. When we see it in the movie, the lines are said by maybe the lady in red, or the lady in yellow says the lines that belong to the lady in green in the book. But if it fits her story, her background story better, and her issues in the movie better, the lines will be given to her. So we have a mix and match of lines in the movie, different from what is originally found in the book. And the movie has dialogue and an expanded storyline, and it discusses more issues that are rife in society now than in the movie than we find in the book, which was written for a time as 1977 and even before then. So let's meet the cast. Now I'm going to be talking about the cast of the movie, not the whole cast, but the female cast, the major female cast. And when I talk about them, I'm going to talk about I'm going to be giving a brief summary of what their struggles in the movie were. First of all, we meet Crystal. Crystal is played beautifully by Kimberly Elise. Crystal is in a relationship. She has a boyfriend called Bo Willie Brown. Bo Willie Brown is a war veteran who has not been able to receive his benefits, and he also suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. Together they have two children, and he constantly abuses Crystal physically, sexually, mentally, guilt tripping her, beating her, etc. etc. And still he's asking Crystal to marry him, which she won't because of his mental health, his condition, and of course what he does to her. And he is also basically asking her to marry him because he thinks that when she marries him, it's going to be a reason why they give him his benefits. And all of this is explained, of course, better in the movie. But she refuses because of the kind of abuse that she has to go through. At the climax of the movie, we find Bo Willie Brown coming over to the apartment where Crystal lives with the two children, and once again asking her to marry him, and she refuses. Meanwhile, she has been brought to the apartment in her boss's car. Her boss, we are going to be meeting soon, in her boss's car, and he accuses her of cheating on him and then asks her to marry him. And when she says no, he picks up the babies, the two children, who are toddlers really, and drops them from the five-story apartment window of where she lives, and of course drops them to their death. And that is Crystal's struggle. Next, we meet Janet Jackson, who plays Jo. Jo is Crystal's boss. Crystal is Jo's executive and personal assistant. So Jo is a boss lady. Jo owns and runs a company, a female magazine company, and she's very successful, very snobbish. And later we do find out that Bo is married, and she's married to a man who is on the low down, or on the down low rather. This is a term I have just learned, and that it simply means that her husband, Carl, likes to have sex with men, although he's married to her. And in the movie, we find that because of the way he has chosen to live, he brings home HIV and she contracts it from him. And that is Joe's struggle. Then we have Juanita, who is played by Loretta Devine. Juanita is a nurse and also runs a non-profit organization for women. Juanita's struggle is that she has a very inconsistent boyfriend who is unfaithful to her. So he's always leaving, and every time she comes home, she goes to work in the morning, comes back in the evening, and she's in fear and she's and trepidation of whether or not the boyfriend has finally packed up and left. So that's just how she lives. She lives in the constant fear of his leaving her. And sometimes he does, sometimes he comes back, but he's actually just very inconsistent. So it's Juanita, because of the non-profit organization she runs, has to go see Joe, being a wealthy woman, to being wealthy and a woman, to request funds to help her run the non-profit organization. And that is when she continued, like she runs into Crystal. I mean, Crystal is the personal assistant, and Joe does not see her till once or twice later, so she constantly runs into Crystal. We also have Tanji, who is played by Thandiwe Newton. Tanji is a girl who works at the bar. She is wild and man hungry and would literally sleep with anyone. She would sleep with a married man, any kind of man that really comes her way and returns her interest, she would sleep with him. So we find out later that Tanji was raped by her grandfather, and that is why she has turned out this way. Tanji is Crystal's neighbor. They live in the same apartment building together. Next, we have Yasmin, who is played by Anika Noni Rose. Yasmin is a dancer and she runs a free dance academy to help the girls in the community. So the community where the whole of these stories are going on is Harlem, and it is also the community that was referred to in the book. So Yasmin runs her dance school, dance academy, to just help the girls in the community do other things than have sex and have babies and get abused. She also encourages them to apply to colleges, get an education, etc. Yasmin meets a man, gets acquainted with him, and to her, they start dating. So she invites him to come over to her apartment for dinner. She offers to cook for them. And when he comes to her apartment, he rapes her. And then she tries to report to the police, and unfortunately the police tell her, we are sorry, we can't arrest this person because there is no way to prove rape. And so she has to live with a double trauma of knowing that, one, she was raped, and two, her rapist is walking free because she let him into her life and let him into her apartment and agreed to be connected with him and spend time with him. Next, we have Kelly, who is played by Kerry Washington. Kelly is a social worker. She is on Crystal and her family's case. She's the social worker that is working with Crystal, investigating the abuse that the children and Crystal suffer. And she also is trying to have a baby with her partner and not succeeding. So she goes with her partner in to see the doctor, gets tests done, and receives the devastating news that she has a scarred fallopian tube due to an STI that she did not treat when she was younger, and so it has scarred her fallopian tube. And we find out also that this STI that she contracted was from a man who had actually who was a womanizer and had actually like come into the midst of her and her friends and slept with all of them and literally broke the friendship and destroyed the friendship. And not only does she have to suffer from the lost friendship, now she also has to suffer from the fact that she contracted an STI from him that has scarred her fallopian tubes and she would never be able to have babies. For the major cast, we finally also have Nyla. Nyla is played by Tessa Thompson, and Nyla is in Yasmin's dance class and is Tanji's baby sister. So Nyla is just finishing. When the movie opens, we meet Nyla in Yasmin's dance class talking about how she just finishes high school and on graduation night she lost her virginity. Then we find out also that Yasmin is pregnant and has to go in for an abortion, and she alone has to go to this decrepit slum backwaters, very cold and sterile and dirty abortion clinic that is not even an abortion clinic. It's literally just an apartment that has hospital stuff in it. And even the abortionist is drunk, very drunk, and she's all alone. Nyla herself is all alone and has to go through all of this herself. So I think the movie improved on Ntozake Shange's work, and here's why. First of all, the adaptation into a movie caused there to be a linear storyline that told the same story in a different style, but still encapsulated the heart of the message. We find that this movie expands on the work. Because there is now a storyline, it is so much easier for more people who may not necessarily understand poetry to understand the message by following the stories presented. You don't have to be so literally inclined to understand what the story is, because the stories are told clearly, and therefore you don't have to be very literally inclined to understand the heart of it, which is the message that it is trying to pass across. Most people can understand it better. Understand the message better because it is now said and passed across in a language that is more understandable by more people. Not everybody speaks or would understand the vernacular that the book was written in, but more people speak and understand the language that the movie was delivered in, and so the message again can be understood by more people. People are more likely to see a movie any day than read a book or go to the theater. I mean, you can be in the comfort of your home and watch a movie, but going to the theater, picking a book, less likely than actually seeing a movie. So this movie again brings the issues discussed to a wider audience, because it's a movie, more people will see it, and as more people are seeing it, more people will get the message. A movie requires less imagination from the viewer to evoke emotion than one from listening to or reading poetry. Emotions make people sit up and listen. And this movie, I promise, definitely evokes emotion. Once somebody is emotionally involved, you have been able to capture their emotions. They are more likely to sit up and listen. And I'm not saying that the book or the original work is not emotional, but there's more emotion in the movie because you don't require that much imagination to be able to get those emotions out of it. You have to pay attention if you are reading a book or watching at the theater, especially if it's the language is not something that you would understand normally. You will have to pay attention to be able to understand what emotions the presentation of the work is trying to awaken in you. But because the movie is very linear and very open, and language is also understandable by the general public, it's easy to just pick up on the emotions that are being presented, and so it is a stronger medium through which the message of the work, again the message of the work can be passed or is passed. And then the movie uses life situations that are more rife in today's society, and so that makes it more relatable, and the story is more relatable. So in summary, I think the movie is an improvement on Shange's work because it is presented in a form that appeals to, reaches out, and is better understood by a wider audience without changing the original message, and also managing to infuse to some extent the poetic monologue style with which the original form was written. So I feel like this movie just gives us the best of both worlds. Shange's originalities to some extent, and then a better understanding of the message without changing the heart of it. So these are the reasons why I think this movie improved on Shange's work. Ntozake Shange passed away in 2018, 8 years after the movie was produced. So she was definitely alive to see the movie and react or respond to it. So here is her response. So in an interview it was not necessarily an interview, it was a sit and talk back at the Bernard University Center for Research on Women. Ntozake had an interview there, a sit and talk there, and she was asked about her response to the movie, and these are the things that she had to say. First of all, she talked about the shortening of the title. She said, "Oh, if it's her work, then her title should have been left untouched," and was not too happy about the fact that Tyler Perry decided to shorten the title in the movie. She also commented on how teary and emotional the movie was, or not necessarily emotional, teary. So she talked about how she knew when she is performing the poems herself, she cries, of course, but at the end of her lines. And she talked about how the characters in the movie crying in between their lines, as they were saying their lines, crying, and she found that very incredulous. She also talked about how she did not allow the infusion of any kind of religious reference in her work, in her original work, which was very intentional. She wanted to leave all kinds of religion out of it. But because of Tyler Perry's background, and he cannot help but infuse religion into a story about suffering, kind of. So she passed comment on that. So she also talked about how in her work, the women, despite the fact that they were talking about their struggles, they still found joy and laughter. And this is a quote from Tony Cade Bambara in MS Magazine, in Miss Magazine, and she says, "The book celebrates the capacity to master pain and betrayals with wit, sister sharing, reckless daring, and flight and forgetfulness, if necessary." That is just part of the quote. So she says, Shange also says, "When I wrote this, there was a lot of joy in it, despite the struggles. The women were dealing with their struggles very joyfully and with laughter. But in the movie, she says, you find that there is just a lot of tears, there is just a lot of crying. The weaknesses are portrayed more than the strengths, and that is not what she intended when she was writing this work." She also commented about how it was a really great idea. I mean, the original work is a choreo poem, so it was a really great idea to open the movie by movement, dance, recital, and all of that. But just after it opens with that, it is cut short, and there is no more movement, there is no more dance, there is no more rhythm, and all of that. Also, Tyler Perry, on Shange's response to the adaptation, said in an interview with Sirius XM, when asked about what her response was, he just plain out said that, and I quote, she said she didn't like the movie, and she made it clear she didn't like the movie. So despite the comments, Shange acknowledged in a different interview that, okay, so this is what she said, and I quote, I think the opportunity Mr. Perry afforded me in brackets was to expand my audience in my demographics and beyond it, because I now have a whole slew of younger viewers, both men and women, and I think that's helpful. And so the interviewer goes ahead to ask her, so your reaction overall to the movie was positive? And she says, for the most part. So I personally, after watching all of these interviews, could also gather that Shangi's dislikes were based off of personal preference. So she prefers the abstract, kind of non-realistic response to everything. She said in one of those interviews that her way of dealing with life is she doesn't care about background stories. She doesn't care about groundedness. Her characters can fly in from anywhere and fly out from anywhere. And so this movie was just very grounded. Everybody had a background story. Everything was just like, you could trace everything back and back and back to where the trauma and the struggles are birthed from. And she just is not the kind of person who would want to deal or look into all those kinds of things. So that is just her way of dealing with it. And I feel like it's not like she thought the movie was bad. It's just, it's not her personal style, and she would not particularly enjoy it because it's not something that she personally prefers or exceptionally likes. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation and have learned a thing or two about both Ntozake Shange and her work, and Tyler Perry and his work. Thank you.